Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Collins, the Synergy Group's coordinator for CS Week, and I'm assisting with production this morning for the webinar. Before we begin today's webinar, 311, not business as usual, shared services model, we would like to cover a few light housekeeping items. You will notice your chat window is disabled, although the Q&A section is open, and you can upload your questions. Your questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Should you encounter any difficulty with your audio or video, please contact Cisco WebEx at 1-866-229-3239. Now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Rose Minton. She's the president of Heights Consulting and the consulting support for CS Week 311 Synergy Group, your moderator for this webinar. Rose, it's yours.
In moderation this morning for the 311 webinar. The 311 webinar is, of course, co-sponsored by our research partner, ICMA. And the topic today is 311, not business as usual. We've talked in the 311 Synergy Group about all the ways that we've been able to expand 311 customer service, including using it to take calls for building maintenance, to use it as an IT help desk. But we've got three presenters this morning that are going to present their shared service models and also take questions, answer questions that you've submitted through the presentation at the end of the presentation. The panelists today are Mike Majors from the City of Denver. Mike is a long-term member of the 311 Synergy Group. He's provided a lot of good support for us as a steering committee member. He was involved as the manager in the startup of the 311 operations for the City and County of Denver, and he's continued to develop those operations by including other services, as you'll hear today. Gina is Cisco, and she's another long-term call center professional with a background in 911. She was also the manager and instrumental in the startup of Sacramento's 311. And finally, Esther Tannenbaum from the City of Albuquerque. She's the director of Albuquerque's 311 customer service, and in addition, the mayor pulls her in quite frequently to work on efficiency projects throughout the city. She's slated to be the chairperson of the 311 Synergy Group in 2013, and she also was involved in the startup of the 311 Center in Albuquerque. So you have three seasoned professionals today that are going to present information about their shared services model and take your questions, answer those questions that you're submitting through the presentation. Let me tell you a little bit about the 311 Synergy Group. We're an industry networking group. We've been around for about 6 years, had 7 meetings. Our objective is to provide education, strategy, information sharing, and also some fun times when you attend our meetings. We co-sponsor with ICMA 4 webinars per year. The next ones that are coming up are in January. We're going to present some results that were compiled by our chairperson, Don Stickney, at the City of Minneapolis. He'll be sharing comparative results of a benchmarking survey that he completed in the summer of 2011. And also in March, we're going to be giving you a preview of the spring meeting for the 311 Synergy Group. That spring meeting will be in Dallas-Fort Worth, April 29th through May the 1st. And we're already building out a very robust agenda with a lot of opportunities for your participation, should you be interested, and also participation with our vendor sponsors. We do have a call for presentations out right now. If you're interested in presenting at the 311 Synergy Group meeting, you can tell us about that through LinkedIn. That's where we manage the 311 Synergy Group, and we have discussions with one another. We post information that would be of interest to you as a 311 manager. And we'll also be posting this presentation on LinkedIn. So you'll have access to this presentation after we're finished today. Just as a follow-up to what Lisa said, you won't be able to talk with us or chat with us, but we'd sure welcome your questions in the lower right-hand panel. those questions you can enter any time in the presentation, and we'll answer those at the end. I'll moderate that question and answer process. And we do need to stop at the end of the hour. So if there's questions that we have not gotten to, we will be sure and answer those, and we will post those on LinkedIn. So that's the introduction, and I'm going to turn this over to Mike Major.
Thanks, Rose. Greetings from Denver, everybody. As we speak, it's snowing here in the city of Denver, and it's 28 degrees. So if you live east of us, we were going to be passing all of that snow your way. As Rose said, my name is Mike Major. I'm with the City and County of Denver. I've been with the 311 operation since its launch in February of 2006. Today I've chosen to speak a little bit about not just the shared service initiative that the City of Denver began in 2009, but more so some of the challenges that at least we met during that process, and specifically the challenges that we had in the 311 operations side. In 2009, Mayor John Hickenlooper shared an executive order with all of the employees of the City of Denver that indicated that we were going to begin to look at a shared service initiative or a shared service model for the City of Denver. And at that time, we looked at several different prospects or several different possibilities as far as which groups we were going to be doing as far as a shared service model. And customer service or 311 was an obvious choice. That's something that we had been doing by adding additional agency and division partners throughout the last 5 years. So it made perfect sense to have customer service 311 as part of that initiative. Our human resource group was also chosen. Prior to the shared service initiative, our human resource was spread out throughout the city in multiple little pockets based on whatever agency and division, with as few as 1 or 2 people and as many as a couple of dozen people assigned to the human resource elements of each one of the divisions. So it made perfect sense to look at that and bringing it into a centralized group and realizing some efficiencies through that. Also, payroll and time accounting. In 2009, we brought Kronos, which is a time and attendance application online for the city, so it made sense there to also make that part of the shared service initiative. The procure to pay, or through the division for purchasing, they also had a new application that they wanted to bring online, so they made that part of the initiative. And then the last one of the 5 groups that we had brought on for shared services was technology services. Very similar to the human resource group, the technology service group was also made up of little pockets, and each one of the agencies or divisions had their own small little IT group. Some of them went different directions. There was no effort as far as trying to centralize or trying to gain some efficiencies through a centralized technology services group, so we decided to add that. So that was the 5 groups that we started out with in 2009, and it did become part of the 2010 budget. We are concentrated during the entire time for the shared service initiative on structural and sustainable efficiencies. One of the issues that came up and popped up almost immediately was because of, I'm sure that just about everybody that's on the call today has experienced some kind of budget challenges over the last 24 to 36 months. And unfortunately, the structural and sustainable efficiencies process was pretty much given a backseat to the budget. And unfortunately, as we went through the shared service initiative, the chat and the talk among city employees and even the outside and the citizens was more from a budget standpoint and trying to cut back on FTEs and that kind of thing rather than looking at the efficiencies of a true shared service initiative. The approach that we took with all 5 of the groups, we had a committee that we formed, and there were several people from each one of the groups on the committee. We established a playbook, and this playbook was pretty much common for all 5 of the groups, from a kickoff communication all the way down to number 9 as the transition being completed. The process itself, we had business analysts that were assigned to each one of the groups. And as we went through and looked at each of the divisions that we were going to be looking at, human resources literally went through the entire city, technology services the same way. In 311, we chose 5 divisions that we were going to look at based on their call volumes and also the ability for 311 to assist and help them with first call resolution. That included our Treasury division, it included motor vehicle, it included our traffic engineering group, also wastewater, and then the last one, which was a huge effort, was the city and county court system. Those 5 groups represented almost 200,000 calls that were coming into the city every year. So we felt by looking at a shared service initiative and having either all or a majority of those calls routing into the 311 center would accomplish what we were looking for as far as the efficiencies from a 311 shared service initiative. As part of the 311 initiative for shared services, as we all know, one of the main reasons why most cities bring a 311 piece in place is just not the 911 center and trying to alleviate emergency calls going into their emergency centers, but also enhanced reporting. As we went out to each one of these 5 groups and looked at the possibility, and as the introduction or the kickoff meeting, the improved service that we felt we could offer by adding them to our partnerships. Prior to the shared service initiative, we had 24 division partners that were actually, we were supporting and answering calls within the 311 center. This would have brought our partnerships up to 29. As we went through the shared service initiative, however, we found very abruptly that some of those groups found it rather difficult to accept the 311 piece and found it challenging, if you will, for them to go through the process and the analysis and for them to become a full-blown partner with 311. At the end of the process of those 5 groups, we brought in 3 as full-blown partners, the City and County of Denver court system, and also our wastewater division decided that they were going to continue taking calls on their own as they had in the past. We spent an awful lot of time with the City and County of Denver court system. About a 120-day analysis was conducted. We felt that we were going to be able to offer them at least a 30% first call resolution, but the court system, being away from the executive branch and the legislative branch of the City of Denver and how it's structured, the court system is very independent, and unfortunately they decided that they were going to continue to handle the 125,000 or so calls that they were getting on a yearly basis, mainly from the traffic division. The last thing is that I want to really speak about, and the majority of the time that I have left here, is the risks and the issues that came up during our initiative. The scope and schedule creep from the standpoint of the analysis and the projects as we kicked them off, we divided each one of them into a small, medium, or large complexity, each one of them requiring either 60, 90, or up to 120 days to complete. However, as we went into each one of those groups and we began to do the analysis, it's very difficult sometimes to keep the scope of the project and the schedule on time. We started out thinking that we would be able to do all 5 of those groups within the 2010 timeframe. We started a little bit early in about November of 2009 with the motor vehicle division, which gave us a little bit of a head start. However, that 12-month project became an 18-month project because of the scope and the schedule and the way it turned, particularly with the court system, and we just had a lot more. We bit off, I think, sometimes more than we could chew. Number 2 is the agency and division cooperation. I think that all of us, as we bring in partners, depending on how your city is operate, I think we always have some risk as to the divisions and the agencies accepting and being willing partners with 311. I think there's still a lot of hesitancy out there as far as maybe some old school thought as far as I'll take care of my own business and I don't need any help from the outside. I think that as our new partners come in, we begin to look at, and they can sell the product themselves by way of saying, we're glad we went with 311 because not only do they help us with a lot of the first call resolution, but the efficiencies and the ease of access for the citizens is increased by far. So the agency division cooperation, even though the mayor had an executive order that came out, like I mentioned prior, in 2009, there was still a lot of hesitancy and a lot of pushback from just about every single agency and division that we went in and visited. The only exception to that was our Treasury division. Treasury was more than happy to have us help. Because of budget cuts, they went from 12 people answering phone calls down to 4. So they really needed our help, and they were more than willing to partner with us, and we brought them on board in March of this year. At first, I thought that there was going to be some space constraints. The call centers only have so much space. My call center here, we felt that if we would have had a full-blown effort and all of those 5 divisions would have become full-blown partners, we would have had some space constraints. So not only did we have the shared service initiative itself, but we also had to have our real estate folks involved from the standpoint of trying to find us a new space. So as a result of that, not bringing in some of those agencies as we hoped for, the space constraint became a little less than what we thought because I had to actually cut some space down as well. So we're still in the same center. We are at full capacity right now. The space will probably become an issue as we get into the future. But we're also looking like at some of the other cities have looked at telecommuting and maybe hoping with that. The hiring process, the last item there on the list was something that every single one of the 5 shared service initiative groups experienced. The hiring process by way of consolidating and transferring FTEs from one group to another became very difficult. The HR group had the most problems with that because they did have to go through some layoff processes and reconsolidation and reassigning some people. It became an issue that was so hot that at some time we did have some court cases that were presented because of the hiring process, and it became a very difficult process for not only them but also the technology services group. Okay, that's all I have at this point. I do know that one question did come up during my process here, and we'll answer that at the end of the presentation. And I'd like to turn it over to Gina from Sacramento.
Good morning, everybody. Guess I need a new slide here. That would be good. City of Sacramento. Everything we did was very unconventional. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, it's sunny and 75 here today. We are the capital of California. The vast majority of our residents are employed by the city, the county, and the state. And yes, we are struggling if you've read the papers about California. Our population just shy of 500,000. Beautiful city if you've never been here. Lots and lots of trees, 2 rivers, and we're the place in between San Francisco and Lake Tahoe. And we are a city within the county of Sacramento. The county and city share virtually no services. So I'm lucky in that I just have to worry about the 98 square miles that's the city of Sacramento. So it's a pretty clean model. Our center is 24/7, and we do provide dispatch. For example, to animal control 24/7. We do all of parking enforcement, after hours, and all of the on-call utility, facility maintenance type workload. So we do stay open, unlike some of our counterparts. The 311 notion was talked about probably back in 2004 and 2005, and at that time I was the 911 manager and asked to sit in on the committee to think about 311, and I don't know what I was thinking. I left a perfectly good job and reduced my digits and went to 311. Which I don't regret at all. It was a great move for me. At the time, we had a city manager that was a real champion of 311. He understood it. He was dedicated to funding it appropriately. I had this beautiful org chart and $8 million to spend, and it was just going to be great. And then I went on vacation, and when I came back, the city manager had been fired. I'd been in the job for a few months. All the assistants had been fired, and we essentially had to grovel our way up to get some traction underneath the notion of 311 because all of our champions were gone. Nobody wanted to play. I know Mike mentioned how difficult it is to get departments to accept that perhaps someone else can help them or someone else can be as much of a subject matter expert. The financial crisis was the best thing that ever could have happened to us in Sacramento. We found, I shouldn't say that, but for 311 anyway, we found ourselves in a place that we'd never been in before, and I think people began to realize that we needed to do things differently than we had ever done them in the past. I wish we could say that we had a very organized, structured approach to 311 as Denver seems to have had. That's not true here. It was find the low-hanging fruit and see if you can grab at it. For us, the first big department that we got was code enforcement, and that was as a direct result of the city's finances, departments having to reduce budgets by 30–40%. So that's when we became appealing to our sister departments in the city. And not only were we appealing, we were free. And I did pretty much everything I could do to demonstrate the value of 311. So we took over the code enforcement call center, and literally at that point there wasn't memorialized training or curriculum, and so we worked very closely with them to try to come up with a plan of training. Our beginnings were extremely humble. Like I said, we took anything that we could get. If you want to call it a phased approach, that's fine. That's really not what happened here. Another thing I like to emphasize is that I believe we are the least expensive 311 in America. It does not take a fortune to launch 311, but you do have to be willing to take what you can get. There's nothing sexy about our call center. All of our equipment is used except for the computers. We do have an amazing CRM system, which is probably the nicest thing we own. It's Siebel CRM from Oracle. But it takes time, and it takes energy, and it takes relentless passion and motivation to move a project like this forward, particularly when departments are threatened by the notion of giving up their work. 311 in Sacramento processes every single service request, which means anytime a city employee goes out and does a body of work. We do potholes, animal control, graffiti, street lights, parking, park maintenance, building permits, everything that, it's easier to tell you what we don't do. We don't set up utility accounts, we don't give refunds, and we don't do park reservations, and we don't sign you up for classes through Parks and Rec. That's what we don't do. We do everything else. The largest body of work that I kind of wanted to share with you today is the work we do for the Department of Utilities, and that includes water, sewer, drains, and solid waste. 30% of our workload is for the Department of Utilities. And I kind of jumped around here a little bit, but we do everything for them, for utilities, except set up a new account, billing disputes, and refund money to customers that may have a refund coming to them. We started out by migrating over the easy stuff, which we thought was water, sewer, and drains. It's a smaller body of work, and essentially we did that in October of '09, I believe, and spent a lot of time with utilities ensuring that we were doing what they wanted us to do. That's the other thing. When you're reaching out to departments, you really need to let them drive whatever it is they want you to serve, what service you want to provide for them. After we had kind of mastered water, sewer, and drain for a while, we accepted the beast, which I call garbage. I had no idea that people care about their trash as much as they do. It is the #1 call for service in the city of Sacramento, and followed by animal care. We track every missed pickup, every broken lid, every wheel that falls off of a garbage container, all the illegal dumping, and on and on and on. It's a huge body of work. One of the things that we like to do is produce a monthly report for our customer department that drills down to the minutia, so I can literally tell the solid waste manager how many can lids broke. This is just a very static numerical report. It can certainly be shown in different ways, but we track all of our calls at 311 in 5 different categories. information calls, which is just a question and an answer, a service request, meaning a city worker needs to complete a body of work, a comment, someone wants to make a statement, you know, I like the mayor, I don't like the mayor, a complaint, and a complaint being about the behavior or action or inaction of a city employee, and then non-city information. Because we're in the center of the county, surrounded by a number of little cities in the totality of Sacramento County, we get a lot of calls for those other municipalities, and we do track every single one of them. So maybe someday we can bill them for the work we perform. The report you're looking at, if you key in top left category, it says information. And on the total line, you can see that there were spikes. There were programmatic changes to solid waste in July of 2010, September 10. If you look over to May of 2011, we had a huge spike. Things like route changes, adding new programs, stopping particular services that we encountered because of budget cuts really has an impact on the workload. Down lower on service solid waste garbage, and that's just wet garbage, doesn't include recycling or green waste. We separate that all out. There's an item about the middle called kick trucks, and that means we missed somebody's service and we're going back out the next day to pick up their can. There you can see, you know, spikes in July, spikes in May and June, inordinate impacts on the call center due to programmatic changes. These are the kinds of things that a division manager would look at and say, okay, why is this happening? You know, why are we spending more money here? What happened to our business that caused that to occur? This next slide is a sample of mining the data on a map. Our council members really like this. They particularly like it when they go out to community meetings and they have it in preparation for those meetings, so they really know where the issues are in their council district and what people might be wanting to discuss prior to getting there. This is just a sample of missed garbage pickup for lawn and garden, recycling, and wet garbage in one council district. And I didn't throw all the data on there because it can get messy. But you can see there's a black cluster to the bottom right. You know, was it an equipment failure? Did we have a replacement driver? These are the kinds of questions and that are useful to the managers running these programs. Another big issue with relationship to utilities in Sacramento is that plug drains. As I said, it's not sexy, but it's really important. We don't handle bad weather here very well, and when it does rain, we do have a struggling infrastructure. In some places, our underground plumbing, if you will, is over 100 years old. And so when it does rain, the streets flood quickly. It's low-level flooding, but people still freak out. And in the past, the call center would just be slaughtered with calls. And the system that we had in place prior to the changes that we made was old, it was homegrown, it was unreliable, and it was not robust at all. We had tons of duplicate calls being entered, a horrible way for field services to manage the workload, and they didn't have field view of the work. There was really no management of it at all. So what we did was we created an interface with our Siebel system to the system used by Water, Sewer, and Drains, CMMS. I'm not an IT expert, but I can help you afterwards if you have questions about that. So we modified it so that our customer service reps could have easy access into our Siebel system, which feeds into CMMS. What you're looking at is what a field supervisor in the drain department can actually see on their laptop. So in this particular one, it's a horrible cluster of plugged drains. We call them PDIs. But at least they have an idea where they should be moving their crews or where the concentrated areas of difficulty are for them. They can drill down to a degree where they can see, map pages, their utility map pages, the type of priority, when it was entered, dispatched, the complainant information, cross streets, radio number of the unit assigned to it, the areas. It's actually, I like to call it really sweet. So what happened after we did this is that now when it rains heavily in Sacramento, the call center manages the workflow very easily. and then the dispatcher has no problems assigning the work, and the crews in the field have a much better idea of where their difficult areas are and can better deploy their crews. So this is really a great partnership with our drain crews. We, I think I lost a slide. Hold on a minute. I did lose a slide. Well, I'm going to talk about stuff that's not on a slide. We had a very unconventional approach, but we did see a reduction in cost per call from about $5.50 to, I believe, $2.20 right now. Like Mike said, we had about 9 call centers. We're down to just 3 now, revenue, utility billing, and us. Definitely reduced headcount. We are doing with 19 people what was previously done with approximately 36, 38 people. I'm not saying we're doing it extremely well, although it is efficient. Customer service is very good. However, the wait times, we were struggling with that. We could certainly use more people in our call center. We did achieve a 13 to 17% reduction in 911 calls, and there's definitely improved communication between departments. But it took a long time. It is a huge paradigm shift to get people to realize that perhaps, yes, there's this group that can help them so they can focus on the higher level things that require a greater subject matter expertise. We now have a new city manager who completely understands and appreciates the notion of 311 and what that can do for him as a tool in budget, assigning FTE, modifying programs so that we can improve customer service. Our implementation was definitely different. Training is always challenging. We have a very flat organizational chart at 311. There's a manager, an analyst, and 1 supervisor, and 19 call takers. I also manage the city's animal shelter now. That's how things have become in Sacramento. But we're doing all right. We track every single call. We have a great amount of data. We're starting to mine it a little differently, and this afternoon we're having a conversation with the county on perhaps taking it regionally. So exciting things are happening, and I'd be happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you. And I'm passing it on to Esther Tenenbaum from Albuquerque now. There's my slide that was missing. There you go. Are you there, Esther?
I'm here. Hello, everybody. So since we're doing weather updates to start with, I've got the weather pattern between Denver and Sacramento going on here in Albuquerque. It's another beautiful day, but a little bit cloudy. We're waiting for some of Denver's weather to head down here, which it usually does. So that's a little bit about Albuquerque. If you haven't been here, you're always welcome to come visit. I'm going to talk as well about shared services, and I have one of the things I want to stress is 311 is the face of the city, and I think that that's true in all municipalities, but we really preach that here. So one of the things you'll find is when someone lands at the Albuquerque Airport, they're greeted with a sign that indicates to call 311 for all your non-emergency city government needs. So right away, we want our tourists to know we're here. There's also new signage out throughout the airport for cultural services, things to do when you get to the city, and it says call 311. So we're still being heavily promoted by different entities. One of the things that we're real proud of here is that the Albuquerque Convention and Visitors Bureau, which I'll refer to as ACVB, really promotes the use of 311. So to people coming into the city, we're heavily promoted by the Convention and Visitors Bureau. They even admit that they use us themselves when faced with questions about the city that they're unable to answer. There are information booths at the airport, at Old Town, different parts of the city, and when they don't know the answer, they call us to get the answer, to be able to answer their citizens right in front of them. So we've done a lot for them, and since the inception of 311, the amount of calls that the Albuquerque Convention and Visitors Bureau gets has been reduced dramatically. This allows them to focus more on their core business functions, such as increased tourism. So much so that they felt we were a huge value to the community, and they nominated us for a huge award that they give out annually with a huge celebration. It's called the Unsung Heroes Award, and that award is for making a significant impact on the community and the tourism industry. And they feel that with the customer service that, and we are the face of the city, that people get when they call us from all over the world, that it promotes bringing people in to see what our city's all about. So they really believe in what we do. We have a lot of different shared services in Albuquerque. There are a lot of internal. We have calls for everything within the city. We do service requests and we do frequently asked questions. About 81% of our calls or more, depending on the year, can be answered. Our #1 call driver is transit for when is the next bus. And that is about 50% of our call volume, and our call volume is at about 2.4 million right now. So some other shared services is citizens call us for county information. We're able to provide them with direct referrals to the county, the courts. We don't take those calls. We've been discussing with them to do some shared services there, but as everybody's budget's cut, they want it for free. We're not really in a position to be able to do that for them. But we're still talking to them, and we actually have a pretty low price per call, so they are entertaining using us to help them manage their budget shortfalls. In Albuquerque Public Schools, we don't really respond for them. However, we are part of their active shooter program, their school lockdown program. So we got pulled into this because it was identified that with 311 being so easy to remember, if a parent got a text from a child saying, you know, something's going on at school, the parent will more than likely call here, and we could be the first point of contact as that situation arises in a school. Therefore, we've built an infrastructure and process to be able to alert APS Police, Albuquerque Public Schools Police, as well as 911. In case we are the first point of contact, and there have been several occasions where we were the first point of contact. We also, although it's not something we voted for, we got selected by the community to advise citizens if schools are closed due to weather, because APS cannot keep up with the phone call demand, so we're always here, so they can usually find us if school's on a delay. Water Authority, we used to take their calls. We became a separate entity in 2007, yet citizens still prefer to call us to report water-related issues, which is kind of, it's been a little struggle. The reason is we have been directed by Water Authority to refer all the calls to them, and then they don't answer the phone, so the citizen calls us back. So if we get that call back here, we are still processing it. We were real instrumental with Water Authority during the deep freeze in February of 2011. We rerouted Water Authority calls to 311 and expanded to 24/7 and handled over 26,000 calls over a 3-day period. What had happened is, as it was getting colder here in Albuquerque, anybody who tried to call the Water Authority about freezing lines was getting a fast busy. Water, we contacted them, they had no idea what was going on, and we were able to identify for them that their lines were overloaded, they could not handle their call volume, and we went ahead and just rerouted for them. They didn't know what to do. So we were real instrumental in that, and we were recognized, the whole team was recognized for the Employee of the Week for really coming to the rescue of the Water Authority, as well as P&M or Electric. We also do provide human behavior customer service training to all other departments in the city. I've conducted about 18 different sessions for solid waste trash truck drivers, also aviation, transit, Department of Senior Affairs, volunteers, so that we can improve our customer service throughout the city. A large part of what we do in Albuquerque is a shared service. We support our community in various ways to ensure that we meet or exceed our citizen expectations. So some other things that we've been very instrumental in is during the H1N1 outbreak, the Department of Public Health, along with our Emergency Operations Center, went into, a proactive approach to deal with where people can get their shots, when they became available, because there was a lot of concern throughout the community, as I'm sure there was with everybody else. What had happened then is the same thing that happened at Water, and this was back in 2010. The phone lines were not capable of taking all the incoming calls. So I was part of the team to build the procedures throughout the community, how that call flow would route, but nobody ever realized they didn't have the capacity in their lines. Within less than 3 hours, we were able to physically relocate that entire team over to our center and take on those calls because we had the phone capacity. and we helped them for over 3 months. So it was not staffed by us per se, but people could call 311 to find out about the shots, and then if they needed to schedule it, we would transfer back to the phone bank. So it was a huge win for the Department of Public Health, who definitely didn't have the capacity, and we identified at that time our Emergency Operations Center needed to do something about their phone lines, because in the event of a serious emergency in the community, their phone lines would not be able to take on the phone call volume. We partner very closely with 911. We changed our hours recently from 24/7 to 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday, limited services on Sunday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And they do a lot of our emergency calls overnight. We identified less than 2% of our call volume was coming in on our overnight hours, and we were able to save the city $500,000 by consolidating our hours. So again, I want to stress that 311, we are the face of the city. Our top 3 calls that we handle are transit, for when is the next bus, or transit driver complaints. Second is solid waste, for the same types of items that Gina had mentioned, anything solid waste related. So we can also identify, as Gina is able to, for the director to know where their problems are. Why does one route keep getting missed, so that they can actually do a better job at utilizing their workforce, or if they've got problems within a driver, they can see it. Animal welfare is our 3rd call driver. We do get a lot of non-city calls. We don't actually put that in our top 3, but we do consider it as one of our heavy call volumes. And there are things like, where's the best place to get pizza? We get those. I'm sure everybody else does. What is the number for the Rail Runner, which is a transportation system sponsored by the state? So we get all sorts of different non-city as well. And that's it. I'll hand it back over to Rose.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions that came in. The first one was for Mike at the City of Denver. What departments and agencies does 311 support now?
Well, as I think Gina mentioned, I think the easiest way to answer that is to tell you which ones we don't. Right now, the 2 big call drivers, the groups that we do not support at this point is, as I mentioned in my presentation, the county court system. That is between 125 and 150,000 calls a year that we are missing and not tracking. So that is a huge one. Then another one is our right-of-way enforcement or parking management. They outsource that to ACS, which has a application that is very parking management centric. That represents tens of thousands of calls as well that are not being tracked by our 311 system. Most of the other larger divisions and agencies that the city has, we do support, and those calls do roll into the center. Most of your public works group, clerk and recorder, parks and recreation, we have some of the same types of heavy call drivers that both Esther and Gina had mentioned in their presentations as well.
Thanks, Mike. I have a couple of questions for Gina. Gina, when you're handling calls that come in for water, are you able to give them answers, or do you just take a call back, name, telephone number, and do you use their program, which I imagine that means their customer information system? So you can take that one, Gina.
We do use the Department of Utilities Customer Information System. It's CIS PeopleSoft. Unfortunately, we don't have an integration with them. Like most cities, we still have some legacy systems. Not everything is integrated. The vast majority of calls that we take are not transferred out. I would say we're at about 13 to 15% are transferred out, and the rest we handle. We create every single work order. We can look at a customer's account. We can tell them what they were billed for. We do all the entries, for example, for water waste. I'm not sure if I answered the question completely.
Okay, you have another one, Gina. Who did the GIS mapping for Sacramento?
We have an integration with our CRM system and Esri, and that is one of the first integration point we did, and I recommend that to everyone.
Okay. We have a call, a question that some of the panelists can take, not directed to any of you specifically. The first one, can you do a 311 system without a call center? And I'll first answer. I was on a panel at ICMA last month, and we had a gentleman that thought that you could do 311 and never have to create a call center. And I think the panelists, we all agreed, it depends. You can certainly just have 311 and use web self-service, but you do have part of your population that doesn't go to the web. And so if you want 311 to be the face of the city, such as places like Albuquerque, then you would need to have an ability to do it via the telephone, whether you established a call center or distributed those calls throughout your organization, which is a little more problematic. But that's my first response to that. Would any of the other panelists like to answer?
This is Mike. I think I would agree with all of that, Rose. I think that 311 is definitely call center centric. It's something that, you know, I've never even considered it not being call centers, but I'm afraid that if you didn't do it and say a phone call, for instance, would come in, it would become more of just a switchboarding activity where we have a city that's in the metro area here in Denver that has a 10-digit number that people call, and it's exactly that. It goes into a central hunt group within that city, and all they do is switch them out, and they go whatever direction they need to go. So I think that, yeah, there's a possibility. It's something that I don't think a lot of us have ever even considered.
And this is Esther. I would agree with Mike and Rose. I think the benefits I see in it being a call center is that you can standardize and gain some consistencies in your responses, because one of the things you hear from citizens in all communities is, or any business even, is when they don't get the same answer, they can call back 5 different times. If you didn't have a centralized call center and different people answered the phone, you're not consistently potentially you're not consistently providing the same information, therefore causing you even more cost because people are going to call back. So I think you can do it. I think there's a lot of things you need to work through.
Okay. Another question, what is the startup cost for 311? And I'll take that first and say the typical consultant answer, it depends. And I say that because we have people on this call, like Esther, that did a startup, hired 100% of the staff. They were able to leverage technology. They did have to get space. They did have to purchase the CRM software. And so there are locations where they're starting new and creating a center, and the budget for that center is quite different than the budget that Gina described, where they're using existing space, they're using existing employees, they were using existing telecommunications equipment and ACD and routing and IVR and all of that. So it depends on what your need is, how you define what your goals are for 311, and what you can leverage within your own organization. So the next one is another question. Speaking of 10-digit numbers, has anyone had an issue come up where a neighbor has called a 311 center and you've had issues with the landline and cells going to the wrong city?
This is Gina. This is Gina. I'll take that question. Our residents can dial 311 within the city limits via cell or via landline. We have 3 telephone providers, Frontier, SureWest, and AT&T. There is a pocket of about 300 customers in North Sacramento within the city that are SureWest customers, and when they dial 311, they end up at the county utility billing center because the county was on the path of launching 311 and then they aborted, yet they implemented the number and the dialing capability. So as we identify those customers, we are fixing them one at a time, and that was the only way that SureWest could help us. So that seems to have resolved itself, but it did take one at a time approach in fixing it. Otherwise, the only issue we do have is if you're calling from the border, city of Sacramento is divided by the river to West Sacramento. So if you're on the border of the city limits and you dial on a cell phone, you may hit a tower on the other side of the river, so you can't, the call doesn't go through. So there's a little bit of a problem, but not bad.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll comment from Albuquerque. We also have the 311 as well as the longer number. I think Mike can remember. We have shared calls, not a lot of them, but we have. We've also occasionally had calls passed back and forth between El Paso, and it's just because of where people were within the city or within the state and when they were dialing 311. But it's not a huge issue here. It's when we've had the problems and we can identify it, we've just contacted the other 311s just to see if something had changed. We had at the beginning, we had problems with cell phone carriers allowing the 311 number to go through. We got a lot of feedback from citizens, predominantly with one of our cell phone carriers. We sporadically will get somebody who tells us they can't get through, they have to dial the long number. We suggest they go back to their carrier because usually that's where the problem is, but it's not a huge problem.
Okay. Another question for you, Esther. Cities that handle transportation, do you receive compensation for your services?
No. We are trying to get some of the federal money, but at this point we have not been successful. So, no, it's funded by general fund.
For anyone on the panel, how about you, Mike? How do you define and measure first call resolution?
First call resolution in our center is defined as when the citizen calls in. This is mainly for Q&As rather than service requests. If the citizen calls in and the request or the question is answered, the call is completed within the center, that's determined as FCR and marked as such. If any kind of service needs to be provided by any of the outside entities, any of our service providers, Public Works, etc., those cases remain open until that service is completed and provided by that group.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Another question, any new or unusual partnerships for shared services that anyone is considering? Anything under consideration that's a little bit unique? Any of the panelists?
Well, I know we're working with the county to see how we can better assist them, and actually the state unemployment office is coming out to see me tomorrow, and I've talked to them in the past. I don't know that we'll ever come to a shared service there, but we certainly have looked at the abilities for us to expand. There are a lot of challenges when you take on other governmental entities, and that is their knowledge base. So we approach that very conservatively, but we're always open to ideas.
Okay, and I think, Gina, you're meeting with the county today.
Yes, we are going to talk about a regional approach, actually the city offering service to the county. It's going to be a huge undertaking, but we're at least going to have conversation about it.
Okay, that was the next question. Anyone else looking at a regional 311 operation? Okay. Denver indicated a 30% FCR improvement with 311. Did you have pre-311 stats?
Answer that two ways. One is that improvement that I mentioned was if we would have brought the county courts into our family of partnerships, then we felt that we would be able to offer up a 30% FCR rate just for the court system. One of the beauties of 311 is you do have access to multiple reports. Prior to the 311 launch in the city and county of Denver, those kinds of statistics were not maintained and kept. We barely were able to tell you how many calls we took every day, let alone what types of calls and any kind of first call resolution. So again, that's one of the beauties of a 311 system and an associated CRM tool, is you're able to track and get multitudes of reports, as Gina mentioned in her presentation, showing an example of just literally one of hundreds of kinds of reports that can be obtained.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Gina, the question for you, can you comment on the main drivers that led to such a significant lowering of your cost per call?
Well, I mean, if you think about how it used to be when a citizen would call and get passed around to 3 or 4 employees, and you calculate those labor costs of time spent, is how we came up with the starting dollar amount pre-311 of about $5.50 an hour. We did hire Gartner to help us do a strategy and implementation plan, and they worked those numbers for us. as you reduce the number of times a customer gets passed through the system, there's a reduction in cost per call. And additionally, in just reducing headcount, we had, I think it was 9 call centers. We don't have that anymore. You know, in offering the dispatch functionality across the city, you don't have a dispatcher sitting in multiple different departments. So that's essentially how we drive down the cost.
Okay, thank you, Gina. Question for each of the panelists. Could you just quickly answer what are your service levels, speed of answer, and abandon rate? Mike, you first.
Oh, good question. Prior to the budget kickbacks and some of the resource allocation changes, average speed of answer was 30 seconds. We're currently right now at about 2 minutes. Our average abandon rate prior to the budget situation was about 5%. We're currently sitting at between 12 and 15%. And the service level was 80 and 20. We maintain that about 75% of the time. And now I'm lucky if I can get to a 20%.
Okay. Gina?
I'm going to give you the current reality, not the befores. We were doing beautifully before the budget cutbacks. And I have 19 call takers, as I said, and 24/7. I should have at least 26 call takers. 30 would be ideal. Our abandon ratio right now is hovering at 28–30%. The average speed of answer during peak hours, 8 to 5, is 4 minutes. Sometimes longer, sometimes less, depending on the time of year. And what was the other part of that question?
The abandon rate?
The abandon ratio. Well, last year we lost 100,000 calls. Not something we're proud of, but our reality, but it's forcing us to look at how we can leverage technology better. So iPhone apps, better self-serve on the web. So fortunately, again, the bad news is resulting in us being more creative and moving forward in leveraging technology.
Okay, and Esther.
Yeah, as far as Albuquerque, our service level goals are 80% of our calls in 20 seconds or 30 seconds or less, and we're currently hovering about 86%, and that is a big drop for us. We were in the 90s. Our average speed to answer is less than 10 seconds as an average. What was the other question?
Abandon and speed of answer.
Okay, our speed of answer is less than 10 seconds, and our abandon rate is between 5 to 7%, which is higher than we were just due to staffing levels.
Okay, great. Let's see, Sacramento does not handle billing and refund questions for the water utility, so what exactly do you handle for the water utility?
We take every call for service, for water, sewer, drain, and solid waste. Plant services, very little. That's drinking water production, although we do special projects for them when they do lead mineral testing and they ask our constituents to provide sample water. We'll take those calls, lots of special projects. Every plugged drain, every start service, stop service, water main breaks, all of the field services type calls, we do those for water.
Okay. And Gina, you said your staffing was at 19, isn't that correct?
Correct. I do have 19 call takers.
Okay, and I think then this call should be for Albuquerque. Albuquerque, how many call takers do you have?
Our total staff, because everybody in our organization will take calls during peak time, is 54 right now. So we actually have 42 call takers that are full-time call takers.
Okay. Mike, can you quickly take this one? Are there any other funding sources, grants, federal, state, public, and private partnerships to fund 311?
You know, that's something that I think a lot of us have just now began to look at because of budget challenges. I think there may be some grant money out there. I'm not sure about startup costs and those kinds of things, but it would definitely be well worth the time to research that out and see what is available there. Also partnering with your Office of Emergency Management and your 911 teams. They may have some ideas because their existence pretty much depends on grants and funding of that sort. So that would be a good resource for somebody to at least start at to find out exactly how they do it and what funding may be available out there.
I know the 311 Synergy Group under the leadership of Don Stickney from the city of Minneapolis is very interested in exploring shared relationships and grants and partnerships. And so that is one of his goals this year for the 311 Synergy Group. So this ends our question and answer period. There's a couple of more coming in. There's a question about the pros and cons of including and excluding water utilities. We did do a webinar on that just a couple of, probably 2 webinars ago, and so that information would be posted out at the 311 Synergy Group site at LinkedIn. The presentation that you've seen today will also be posted on LinkedIn under the 311 Synergy Group. If you're not a member, get off the phone and go sign up now. There's over 100 professionals from municipalities across North America participating in the 311 Synergy Group. And so that is a good place to start discussions, post information, get answers to your questions. In addition, this webinar was recorded today, and you'll find that recording at CS Week, and you'll drill down into the 311 Synergy Group. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, our leadership team under Don Stickney is putting together the agenda. Andy Maimoni from the city of San Francisco is our planning lead, and they're putting together the agenda for a very robust meeting in Dallas on April 29th, April 30th, and May 1st. It will include a tour of the City of Dallas Call Center, 311 Call Center, and a very special networking event that will include our partners, our sponsors. So we have a lot of opportunities for network and sharing with one another and with our sponsors, and I invite you to contact Don directly if you're interested in presenting, and also you can indicate your interest out on LinkedIn. So thank you to all of our presenters. You provided such rich information. You are seasoned 311 managers and a great resource for all of us. And thanks to CS Week for the support that you provided in handling the webinar today, providing the technical support and the staffing. And we invite all of you to join us on LinkedIn at the 311 Synergy Group. Thank you.
Bye-bye.